Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian spent the night talking under the moonlight. It was Jian Wushuang's most heartwarming night in the recent years. The next day, the valley was already in an uproar at first light. The experts walked out of their rooms and hurried towards the mountain where the heart-killing sword had been placed. A short while later, a large group of experts had gathered in front of the mountain. Naturally, Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian were among them. Besides these experts, there were two other people present that attracted everyone's attention. One of them was a stout man with tan skin, his body surrounded by a thunderbolt. The other one was a thin and elegant young man with a folding fan in his hand. Their overbearing aura shocked many experts on the spot and instantly revealed their identity as marquises. They are Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu. Neither of them is an expert in sword principle. What are they doing here? They obviously came here for Jian Nantian. The onlookers were discussing the current situation in a low voice. With his eyes squinted, Jian Wushuang looked at the two marquises and nodded. There were both strong and weak marquises. Most of the well-acknowledged among the 72 marquis were in the normal seven-cloud realm, and some of them did not even possess a Dao weapon. Marquis Piaoxue and Marquis Zhangyue were part of the latter. They wanted to kill Jian Nantian, and by doing so they could gain two Dao weapons. Many experts and marquises were here for the same reason. The two marquises had made their way to the valley the very same night after they heard the news. However, though they had been in the valley, for fear of annoying Su Ming, they had to wait until Jian Nantian left the valley to kill him. Since these two marquises rushed here the moment they heard the news, Marquis Xiefeng must have heard the news as well, Jian Wushuang thought while frowning. Right then, with a group of attendants surrounding him, a white-robed man came down. He was a handsome man with a wicked smile on his face and a compelling manner. The experts could not help but be drawn to the man as their eyes fixated on him. Even Jian Wushuang was impressed and shot the man a glance. Is he Su Ming? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. From the chat with his father last night, he had learned that Su Ming was the traitor of Sword Ancestors' bloodline and had something to do with the fall of the bloodline. Yet, only the top experts of the Divine Land knew about it. The common people still thought of Su Ming as the Sword Ancestors' personal disciple. Everyone's eyes turned towards Su Ming when he came out. Everyone except for Jian Nantian. He did not spare Su Ming a glance from the very beginning. He stood straight with his eyes closed, as if he was asleep and had no idea of Su Ming's arrival. For him, only his sword and Jian Wushuang deserved his attention. Your Excellency. I pay my respects to Your Excellency. The experts saluted Su Ming one after another, and even Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu paid their respect with a bow. Ladies and gentlemen, don't be so courteous. Su Ming spoke in a soft and fascinating voice. The experts straightened their backs. Wanlei, Nanyu, I didn't expect that you would come here. Su Ming looked toward the marquises with a smile. We'd love to see how powerful the heart-killing sword is, said Marquis Wanlei. Really? Su Ming sneered and continued. I reckon you're here for something else. Upon hearing this, Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu exchanged an embarrassed look. All right, I don't care what you do when you're outside, but you'd better behave yourselves in Sword Suppression Valley, said Su Ming. Of course we will. Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu nodded heavily, not daring to say one more word. After all, they were just in the seven-cloud realm and at the bottom of 72 marquis, so they had to show their respect even to Marquis Xiefeng, let alone Su Ming, one of 9 sovereigns. They knew very well how powerful and terrifying Su Ming was. Though this sovereign looked gentle and elegant for the moment, he was known as Sword Demon among the top experts in the Divine Land. His personality became quite chilling when it was time to kill. A half-day from now, the heart-killing sword will begin to wake up. Don't miss this rare opportunity. After saying this, Su Ming shut his mouth. However, the crowd got into a heated discussion. Swordsman, Tianming Lord. Look, there are secret chambers at the foot of the mountain, said Hunjian Lord. Secret chambers? Jian Wushuang followed the Lord's line of sight and spotted the chambers. Half a day from now, the heart-killing sword will begin to awaken, erupting with sword essence. The essence itself is an opportunity, and the nearer we are to the sword, the better our benefit will be. Since there are a total of 100 secret chambers that are the closest to the sword, we'll definitely benefit greatly if we can enter one of them. Are there only 100 chambers? Tianming Lord frowned and asked. There were hundreds of experts here, and 100 chambers were definitely not enough. Are you really thinking that every one of us will be able to occupy a chamber? Hanjian Lord laughed and continued. Let me tell you this, 100 is more than enough. At the previous meetings, less than 30 people were able to make their way into the chambers. Why? Tianming Lord was confused. You'll know soon. Hanjian Lord put on a mysterious smile. A half-day had passed while the experts waited impatiently. The hole in the mountain where the heart-killing sword was placed finally began shaking. It's beginning! All the experts concentrated on the hole. Buzz! The shrill echo of a sword resounded throughout the area as a red light covered the sky above the hole. At the center of the light, a matchless magic weapon was slowly rising into the air. Everyone at the scene held their breath while staring at the rising weapon with intent. The heart-killing sword, the sword ancestor's weapon, as well as the number 1 magic weapon in sword principle. Is this the heart-killing sword? Jian Wushuang stared at the floating long sword in the red light, his eyes filled with amazement. The sword was completely red and radiated a chilling light. Even at first glance, people could tell it was a world-shaking sword of killing. However, that was not what startled Jian Wushuang. Instead, it was because the sword was so similar to his triple-kill sword. Although it was different in color and size, the two swords were the same in every other way, including the hilt and the mysterious crack on its blade. The number 1 magic weapon in sword principle, the experts called out in admiration, and their eyes were burning with greed. Every expert in sword principle had a great desire to possess this sword, but none of them had been able to in the past 1,000 years since Sword Ancestor's death because the sword was too powerful to control. Suddenly, the floating sword quivered and another piercing sound echoed, seeming to reach the heavens. A formidable sword essence was unleashed, so overwhelming that wherever it passed, the sky became dark and the void began to ripple. The whole world seemed to be filled with a thrilling atmosphere. Here it comes. As the experts gazed at the sword essence that was rushing towards them at a visible speed, their eyes narrowed and they prepared themselves. Nonetheless, they looked pale after the sword essence swept over them, and some of them even lost their senses. Very few could face the impact with ease. Now I finally understood what you meant. Tianming Lord cast Hanjian Lord an eye. He looked terrible. Though his sword soul phantom had appeared, he could barely block the sword essence with its power. The Lord struggled to march forward, but the closer they moved towards the heart-killing sword, the more they were impacted. They completely believed that the sword essence around the secret chambers had to be unbearably powerful. Among the experts, quite a few could still move to the chambers under the impact. Right now, it's just the sword essence erupting. Soon, there will be thousands of swords saluting the heart-killing sword. Before that happens, we need to get as near to the sword as we can so that we get the most out of this opportunity. Hanjian Lord said in a low voice. Let's go. With a shout, the Lord managed to march 1 step forward. Not just him, the other experts also tried their best to get closer to the heart-killing sword. However, as the strength of the sword essence increased, their path forward became even harder. Swish! A flowing light shot across the sky at amazing speed and approached the foot of the mountain in an instant as if he was not affected by the sword essence at all. He picked a chamber and walked in. The experts were not surprised to see this because the flowing light was no other than Su Ming. As one of the 9 sovereigns, Su Ming was called Sword Demon and had reached great heights in sword principle. It was believed that he was only second to Sword Ancestor at his peak, so it was easy for him to bear the impact from the sword essence. On the contrary, the others were in the middle of a difficult struggle. For example, when Jian Wushuang first experienced the impact, he could barely take it. That is, until he released his 2 sword soul phantoms to help him. Jian Wushuang moved firmly, step by step. Though the impact slowly grew more powerful, he managed to make it to the mountain quickly enough with the help of his double sword souls. Not bad. Suddenly, He heard a soft voice from beside him. He followed the voice and saw his father, Jian Nantian, staring at him in front of a chamber. Jian Wushuang shrugged before walking into one of the chambers. He had accomplished something that many other experts wanted to do as well. Being closer to the heart-killing sword meant the chambers would provide the best benefits. However, only a dozen people made their way to the chambers despite everyone who was struggling hard, and those who succeeded were real geniuses in sword principle. As for Hunjian Lord and Tianming Lord, they had gained a lot in sword principle, but they were still too weak to make it to the chambers. Looks like we have to stop here. Hunjian Lord's face turned red. He was unwilling to give up, but he couldn't move forward even one more step, let alone crossing the 30 meters that separated him and the chambers. He was exhausted and at his limit. Swordsman was able to enter a chamber. I really envy him. Hunjian Lord looked towards the chambers with an envious expression. He was not the only one to have such a feeling. Those who failed to approach the chamber all felt the same. After all, only inside one of the chambers could they experience the 1,000-sword salute in the most profound way. Under the red-colored patch of sky, a matchless sword chi was being released from the blade of the heart-killing sword, which was still surging with an overbearing sword essence. At this moment, Jian Wushuang, Jian Nantian, and Su Ming, as well as the others in the chambers and those who were not, all raised their head. Within the secret chamber, Jian Wushuang raised his head and stared fixedly at the scarlet longsword which was beneath the blood river. The upper stone walls of the chamber were made up of completely transparent gems, which thus allowed him to clearly see everything behind them. The scarlet longsword, under the gaze of everyone present, suddenly emitted the matchless sword chi of the sword ancestor. This unsurpassed sword chi quickly ran through all of heaven and earth. The scarlet longsword's blood-red body became ever more dazzling, causing it to appear like the emperor among swords as it suspended in the air. In Sword Suppression Valley was gathered a large number of sword principle experts, among whom some carried their longswords on their backs, while others kept their longswords in their interspatial rings. But following the appearance of the sword chi, clang 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 clang, within the valley, every sword which was a second-grade magic weapon or better began to point toward the heart-killing sword, regardless of whether they were carried on the experts' backs or kept in interspatial rings. Thousands upon thousands of weapons glowed in all shades of brilliant colors and bowed respectfully toward the emperor among swords as if they were its subjects. In turn, it let out a shrilling sword echo to indicate its enjoyment of the 1,000-sword salute. The 1,000-sword salute! The crowd of sword principle experts expressed their inner shock at the sight of this scene. Even Jian Wushuang, who was in the secret chamber, was equally shocked when he saw his triple-kill sword bowing toward the heart-killing sword. This was a 1,000-sword salute indeed. The emperor among swords had received the adulation of thousands upon thousands of swords. Also, a peculiar wave had begun to spread as the salute started. The deeply mysterious wave contained a matchless sword essence of killing. Right at this moment, everyone within the valley seemed to hear a roar coming from the heart-killing sword. Kill! Kill everyone in the world who's disloyal. Kill! Kill everyone in the world who's unfilial. Kill! Kill everyone in the world who's unrighteous. Every word of this roar was powerfully clangorous, broadly imposing, and universally shocking. Every word contained profound mystery as it diffused throughout. The valley turned gravely silent. The sword principle experts in the valley hurriedly closed their eyes and seized this rare opportunity. Jian Wushuang too closed his eyes. He had been unable to control his triple-kill sword, which remained in a reverent pose, and thus he could only use his finger as a sword as he began to practice within the secret chamber. He exerted a strike which was extremely ordinary and dull. It did not cause even the slightest of waves within the chamber. Jian Wushuang withdrew his finger but quickly exerted another strike. Every subsequent strike he exerted was equally insipid. However, with every strike, the sword light generated became more beautiful in a poignant sense. After 31 successive strikes, he exerted his 32nd. This particular strike was as dull and ordinary as the rest, but a dazzling arc light appeared in the direction of the sword light it generated. The arc light was not only bright and dazzling, but also incomparably beautiful in a poignant sense. So beautiful that it was enchanting. Upon close observation, it was not difficult to see that it was the same strike which Jian Nantian had exerted the previous night. And its name was simply Enchant. It was the third move of the heart-killing sword technique, Enchant. Jian Wushuang had never gained understanding of this move before, but now mastered it with only a little practice, thanks to the opportunity provided by the Thousand Sword Salute. At the same time, he gained not only swordsmanship but also an understanding of the slaughter origin. The unsurpassed sword chi of killing from the heart-killing sword had caused him to involuntarily fall into an epiphany, which immediately provided him with a whole new understanding of the slaughter origin. All of a sudden, he was able to understand many of the riddles surrounding the first restriction of the six-story pagoda. He remained with his eyes closed, but on his right arm, which originally had only 5 slaughter origin marks, quickly formed a sixth from the large amount of slaughter origin that gathered on his arm as a result of the understanding he gained from the epiphany. The formation of the sixth mark was not the end, for a seventh began to form as well. It took shape in only a short time. The seventh origin mark. It ought to be known that the origin understandings which the marks represented were equivalent to the clouds of the Cloud Realm experts, except that they were not as powerful as the latter. This seventh mark meant that once Jian Wushuang attained the Cloud Realm, he would become a being of the Seven Cloud Realm, which was the level of the average Marquis. Despite gaining understanding of the third move of the heart-killing sword technique and having the seventh mark of the slaughter origin formed on his arm, he remained in a state of epiphany. Now it was Jian Wushuang's sword soul that transformed. Originally, 2 firm and tough sword souls rested quietly within his sea of consciousness. At present, however, they were beginning to shake violently, and their volumes sharply expanded together with the frenzied sweeping across of obscure streams of sword essence. Shortly after, traces of sword soul energy surged out from them, and a third sword soul gradually formed within the sea of consciousness. At the same time, 3 majestic sword soul phantoms appeared behind Jian Wushuang. Each of them was nearly 100 feet tall and emitted a terrifying sword essence. 3 sword souls, and they were all first grade. Jian Wushuang only came round from his epiphany after the third sword soul had completely taken shape. 3 sword souls. He revealed a faint smile on his face when he felt the 3 sword souls within his sea of consciousness and the 3 sword soul phantoms behind him. The power of the sword souls was abnormally profound and exceedingly rare. To be able to awaken 3 sword souls at the same time was something few and far between throughout the entire divine land. For instance, Jian Wushuang had seen only his father doing so during the sword principal meeting. However, of the 3 sword souls awakened by his father, only one was first grade while the other 2 were second grade. But he was different. He had awakened 3 first-grade sword souls. Something's not right. His complexion suddenly changed, and he peered toward the 3 sword souls in his sea of consciousness. These 3 sword souls. He furrowed his brows. For some reason, upon seeing the sword souls, he had a false impression that they should not be separate and should instead be a single entity. I feel that these 3 sword souls can be joined into one? An idea arose in his heart. It was an idea which could be considered crazy. However, he could not inhibit it once it flashed across his mind. Joined as one. These 3 sword souls should be joined as one. The heavenly creation skill naturally began to operate in his body as he harbored this idea, in accordance with which the 3 sword souls in his sea of consciousness actually began to slowly amalgamate. The deeply mysterious Thousand Sword Salute provided a massive opportunity. Many of the sword principle experts in Sword Suppression Valley cherished this type of opportunity to the highest degree and were thus meditating in full concentration. Those whose comprehension levels were as high as Jian Wushuang's entered an epiphany in little time. An epiphany was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and the benefits were huge upon going through one. As time passed, the scarlet long sword, which emitted an unsurpassed sword chi of killing beneath its bloody light, finally cooled off. The sword chi of killing vanished. The terrifying sword essence, which had been charging non-stop in all directions, began to dissipate gradually. One after another, The thousands upon thousands of weapons which participated in the salute stopped moving. Even the bloody light which filled the sky began to fade. Finally, the scarlet longsword returned to normal, and, with a fierce roar, slowly headed back to its abode at the bottom of the mountain hole. Everything became peaceful again. Within Sword Suppression Valley, everyone opened their eyes, save for a small number of sword principle experts who remained in a state of epiphany. There was a look of pleasant surprise, yet also a little regret in the eyes of those who opened theirs. The pleasant surprise was because they all received huge benefits from the opportunity provided by the deeply mysterious Thousand Sword salute that just passed. Conversely, the regret was because the opportunity lasted way too short for them to enter an epiphany. In any case, the opportunity was over. It's over. Sighing softly, Hanjian Lord turned his eyes toward Tianming Lord by the side. Right at this moment, a 60 feet tall sword soul phantom appeared behind the latter. "Congrats, Tianming Lord," he said. "Ha." The latter looked pleasantly surprised too. "I'd thought it impossible to awaken a sword soul in this life. It's wonderful that I've finally awakened one, even if it's only second grade." Tianming Lord had indeed awakened a sword soul during the opportunity that just passed. "Both of us have benefited considerably, but the people who benefited the most are those who remained in the secret chamber. By being nearest to the heart-killing sword, they felt the most and thus benefited the most," Hanjian Lord commented. "That's true. I'm jealous of them," Tianming Lord replied praisingly. The sword principle experts who entered an epiphany began to come round one after another, and each of them looked pleasantly surprised beyond compare. Subsequently, some of the dozen or so experts in the secret chamber walked out of said chamber. Within a short while, most of the sword principle experts were gathered together once again. "Where's the swordsman?" There was a look of astonishment on Hanjian Lord's face. All of the sword principle experts, including Su Ming and Jian Nantian, had stepped out of the secret chamber, leaving Jian Wushuang as the only person in there. The benefits he received must be huge. Hanjian Lord could not help remarking. All of a sudden, boom! A voluminous sword essence gushed from one of the secret chambers. Broad and imposing, it contained a boundless murderous intent as it swept across. The experts gathered in Sword Suppression Valley quickly detected the presence of the sword essence and immediately looked toward the secret chamber which Jian Wushuang was in. What they saw were 3 towering sword soul phantoms. Every one of them was close to 100 feet tall and stood side by side like peerless sword masters. The broad and imposing sword essence had originated from their bodies. 3 sword souls. 3 sword souls standing side by side, every one of them majestic in height and first grade. Who was it that awakened 3 first-grade sword souls? The sword principle experts who witnessed this scene were shell-shocked. They had already been shocked when Jian Nantian awakened 3 sword souls previously. However, back then, there was only 1 first-grade sword soul, with the other 2 being second-grade. That was nothing compared to the astoundment of seeing 3 first-grade sword souls. "It's the swordsman. They came from the secret chamber he's in." There was a glimmer in the eyes of both Hanjian Lord and Tianming Lord. To awaken 3 first-grade sword souls was considered an incredible feat in Divine Land, throughout the history of which only a handful of people had been capable of awakening 3 first-grade souls. 3 first-grade sword souls. As one of the 9 sovereigns, even the lofty Su Ming revealed a hint of amazement on his handsome face. It should be known that, to someone who is called Sword Demon, this had only been the awakening of 3 first-grade sword souls. To awaken 3 first-grade sword souls could be considered monstrous. But if so, the sword ancestor's awakening of 6 first-grade sword souls should be considered monstrously beyond monstrous. It was precisely because the sword ancestor had defied the natural order that he earned his name as the ancestor of the sword principle. Though the appearance of the 3 sword souls had captured everyone's attention, this was but the beginning. The following scene would cause everyone's, including the sword principle experts and Master Su Ming's, hair to stand on their ends. Within the secret chamber, the 3 sword soul phantoms, which had been standing side by side, closed the distance between themselves and began to fuse together. A fusion of sword souls? Impossible! How can sword souls fuse? Many of the sword principle experts were so dumbstruck that their mouths were agape and their eyes were filled with astonishment. A fusion of sword souls? Since ancient times, there had been countless experts who had awakened souls, and among them had been many talented experts who awakened 2 or 3 souls, while a select number of exceptional geniuses had awakened 4 or even 5. The sword ancestor, who had awakened 6 sword souls, was considered a monster among monsters. However, regardless of how many souls these monsters had awakened, nobody had ever fused several sword souls together. It had never happened or even been rumored to have happened before. Throughout the history of the Divine Land, various experts had attempted to do so. However, because every awakened soul was unique, they could never be fused together regardless of what the experts tried. Nobody had ever managed to do it. Even the sword ancestor, who awakened 6 sword souls, could not. But now, in the secret chamber, the 3 sword soul phantoms behind Jian Wushuang were fusing together at a speed which allowed the process to be visible. Within Jian Wushuang's sea of consciousness, they had already fused together into one completely. The fusion was complete. Sure enough, the 3 first-grade sword souls had fused completely. In fusing the sword souls, Jian Wushuang had done what nobody in the Divine Land's history had done before. The crowd of sword principle experts, including Su Ming and Jian Nantian, stared fixedly at the secret chamber. A perfect fusion of 3 first-grade sword souls. Holy shit! A series of cries began to reverberate throughout the valley. Holy shit! What a monster! A series of exclamations reverberated in the massive sword suppression valley, which was completely stirred up. The fusion of 3 sword souls was unprecedented in the history of the Divine Land. What was this if not monstrous? In the secret chamber, Jian Wushuang felt somewhat muddled upon becoming aware that he had fused 3 first-grade sword souls together completely. They're fused just like that? Jian Wushuang murmured to himself, his eyes filled with disbelief. He had easily done what nobody else could ever do. It had been nothing more than an idea in his head, which he followed and ultimately succeeded in actualizing on his first attempt. He had done what was impossible for anyone else to do in the simplest, most casual, and most untroubled fashion. It's the heavenly creation skill. After calming down, he finally understood what went on. The biggest difference between him and others was the cultivation method he had mastered. He was an inverse cultivator who cultivated the heavenly creation skill. It was in the blood of inverse cultivators to defy the natural order and go against convention. The heavenly creation skill in his body had involuntarily operated during the fusion of the 3 sword souls. This was an indication that said skill was inextricably linked to his fusion ability. Jian Wushuang felt at ease once he understood this point. The heavenly creation skill was a heaven-defying cultivation method. Anything that was impossible would be made possible upon becoming related to it. The fused body of the 3 sword souls was clearly a tad smaller than what Jian Wushuang had imagined in his sea of consciousness. However, it soon began to shake violently and metamorphosis. That's right, it was a metamorphosis. The sword soul in the sea of consciousness was originally transparent, illusionary, and glass-like. However, its color gradually changed. A layer of gold gradually appeared over its transparent parts, like a newborn baby putting on his first set of clothes. The transparent sword soul seemed as if it had put on garments which were warm gold in color. In only a short time, the transparent and illusionary sword soul in the sea of consciousness metamorphosized into a golden sword soul which emitted a boundless radiance. At the same time, the majestic sword soul phantom, which was formed from the 3 phantoms behind Jian Wushuang, also began to metamorphosis. Like the sword soul in the sea of consciousness, a layer of gold appeared on and gradually covered its entire body. The majestic sword soul phantom gradually solidified and transformed into an impressive golden war god which body mass greatly expanded. It grew at an astonishing speed from its original stature of close to 100 feet. It exceeded 100 feet in the blink of an eye and still continued to grow rapidly. 110 feet, 120 feet, 150 feet. The golden war god, which was originally already of a towering height, grew non-stop under the horrified looks of the numerous sword principal experts in Sword Suppression Valley. Finally, when it reached 180 feet in height, it gradually stopped growing. 180 feet. A sword soul phantom of 180 feet. A golden sword soul phantom? What on earth is this? Shock and bewilderment. Confused, none of the sword principal experts could believe their eyes. For a sword soul phantom, 100 feet was considered the maximum height even if it was first grade. Furthermore, sword soul phantoms were but spectral images, or in other words, shadows which were typically monotone. The sight in front of their eyes had utterly defied what was reasonable. A 180 feet tall, golden-colored sword soul phantom was no longer what they imagined a first-grade sword soul to be. It had surpassed the category of a first-grade sword soul. Is it above first grade? Many of the sword principal experts wondered. Its eyes, which had been tightly closed, opened vigorously right at this moment, a streak of boundless sword essence flashing across them. Boom! Gushing from its body was a boundless sword essence which was a few notches more powerful than the one emitted from the heart-killing sword. This sword essence swept forth with an overwhelming momentum. In a twinkling, it swept onto the bodies of many sword principal experts in the valley. The head-on approach of the gushing sword essence caused the faces of the experts to turn ghastly pale. Some experts even spat blood and hurriedly retreated backward. As it swept through the world, the terrifying sword essence carried an aura of transcendence and intent to outstrip all things of the universe. The next moment, ching, 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 ching. Shrilling sword echoes rang out in every corner of the valley. They were made by the weapons in the hands of the sword principal experts. These weapons had merely saluted when they faced the heart-killing sword previously. This time, however, under the attention of the 18 feet tall, golden sword soul phantom. Clang, 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 clang. Among the thousands of weapons in the valley, those which were magic weapons or better disregarded their owners as they surged out of the interspatial rings toward the sword soul phantom. Like a dense cloud of locusts which covered heaven and earth, thousands upon thousands of weapons gleamed in brilliant colors as they encircled the sword soul phantom. Subsequently, a supreme sword essence swept forth from the sword soul phantom. Shush! Thousands upon thousands of weapons saluted in unison at this very instant, sending shrilling sword echoes into the heavens. These echoes shook the entire world as if they were the voices of immortals. Far away from the divine land, in Jian Wushuang's hometown of the Nanyang continent, inside a cave mansion located within the territory of the Tang dynasty, a middle-aged man in plain gray robes raised his head forcibly at this very moment. He was able to see clearly everything that was happening in the sword suppression valley of the divine land through a void which was hundreds of millions of miles long. 1,000 sword applause for the most powerful sword soul. He's indeed worthy of being the chosen disciple. He has managed to achieve the most powerful sword soul in this kind of place and at such a young age. It probably won't be difficult for him to attain the most powerful sword principle hereafter. Laughing gently, the middle-aged man flipped his hand such that an object appeared in it. Astonishingly, it was a gray stone bead which was as big as a baby's fist. It emitted a peculiar aura. Jian Wushuang would certainly recognize this object with one look. It was exactly the same as the mysterious stone bead in his body which provided him with the heavenly creation skill. It seems that I have to find an opportunity to pass this to him. It was a magnificent spectacle in the sword suppression valley, where thousands upon thousands of swords cried in unison and shook the heavens. Upon witnessing this scene, all the sword principal experts in the valley were astounded. The present scene was, in fact, a few shades greater than the previous one in which the sword caused 1,000 sword salute. And right at this moment, buzz! A shrilling sword echo abruptly sounded with extreme resonance. As it sounded, it easily drowned out all other noises in the valley. At the same time, the thousands of weapons which encircled the soul phantom and had just been crying in unison quickly died down and became silent. Within the entire valley, the only remaining noise was the resonant sword echo. What? Standing among the crowd with his hands on his back, Su Ming, who always had a clear and handsome look, suddenly shifted countenance. Horror, too, appeared on the faces of every sword principle expert as they turned their eyes toward the source of the sword echo. Astonishingly, the sword echo had originated from the deep pit in the mountain. And within that deep pit was only one weapon, which was none other than the heart-killing sword. Swish! A beam of bloody light shot up from the bottom of the pit, instantly triggering a suppressive force from a powerful restriction in the mountainside. Sword Suppression Valley had always been a place intended for the suppression of the heart-killing sword. There was a powerful restriction present in the mountainside where the sword was at. Whenever the sword acted up, the restriction would automatically initiate suppression. But this time, the heart-killing sword lashed fiercely and directly toward the restriction. Its blood-colored sword edge exerted unprecedented power as it viciously stabbed the restriction with irresistible force. For a while, the powerful restriction shook as if it was on the verge of breaking down. This is bad. As one of the 9 sovereigns, it was surprising that the dignified Master Su Ming would let out an exclamation at this very moment. His white garments flapped in the air as he rushed toward the restriction and tried in vain to control the restriction such that it would suppress the heart-killing sword. It was obvious that he had underestimated the power of the heart-killing sword. Or, to put it another way, what he underestimated was the sword's determination and eagerness to break the restriction. He had seen the restriction being perforated by the sword before he reached close to it, on which abruptly appeared an extremely hair-like yet fatal opening. Crack. The opening abruptly grew bigger. The restriction would ultimately be ruptured by the heart-killing sword. Swish! After breaking the restriction, the sword let out an excited howl and transformed into a bloody light which instantly shot through the void. Unexpectedly, it headed toward the 180 feet tall golden sword Soul Phantom, joining the other thousands of weapons. In all its demonic and seductive blood color, it appeared in front of the sword Soul Phantom, jumping up and down in tremendous excitement. The sword principle experts around were flabbergasted by the sight of this. From the secret chamber, Jian Wushuang too witnessed the 1,000 sword applause and saw the heart-killing sword. This heart-killing sword? Frowning slightly, a strange feeling popped up in the bottom of his heart, and he then gestured toward the sword. Although the gesture was a subconscious action, what he did not expect was that, in immediate reaction to it, the sword would let an exclamation and was toward him before floating with an unprecedented politeness in front of him. Its posture was like that of a young child in front of his parents. Such good manners. Is this really the heart-killing sword? Jian Wushuang was somewhat baffled. It should be known that the heart-killing sword was the Divine Land's first sword principle magic weapon, and it was also murderous in nature. A murderous magic weapon of its level should be extremely ruthless, brutal, and supercilious, as could be told from the scene of the 1,000 sword salute some time ago. But now it behaved politely in front of him. He slowly reached his hand out and grasped its hilt, to which it showed no resistance and even became delighted. Shortly after, he began the dripping of blood to bind it to himself. The binding process went through smoothly. In only a moment's time, the binding was complete. Jian Wushuang had, impressively, become the first owner of a murderous sword principle magic weapon in the Divine Land. This is a bit too easy, isn't it? Jian Wushuang muttered in surprise. He knew in his heart that the heart-killing sword had come because of the golden sword soul he metamorphosized. Shaking his head, he did not think any more about it. As soon as his thoughts changed, the 180 feet tall golden sword Soul Phantom behind him began to slowly dissipate, while the thousands of weapons suspended in the air also receded one after another. Everything became calm once again. The entire Sword Suppression Valley fell into a deathly silence. There remained a trace of consternation in the eyes of the sword principle experts, who could not calm down even as time passed. Everyone's eyes were currently fixated upon the inside of the secret chamber. They were all curious whether the monster who caused everything that just happened had 3 heads and 6 arms. The door of the secret chamber bolted open under the watch of everyone, and a figure in black robes slowly stepped out shortly after. He was not tall in stature and had a youthful face which was decent-looking, much as it absolutely could not compare to Su Ming's in terms of handsomeness. He carried in his hand a scarlet longsword which every expert present recognized. It was none other than the heart-killing sword. Considered to be the ultimate sword of killing by everyone, it nevertheless remained tame and calm in the person's hand. The footsteps of the man as he moved forward were steady, sonorous, and forceful. He only stopped walking when he had reached in front of the crowd of experts. Indeed, the heart-killing sword has recognized him as its owner. The experts gazed with complicated looks at Jian Wushuang. Since the fall of the sword ancestor, the heart-killing sword had never had a second owner. It had thus remained in the Sword Suppression Valley for over 1,000 years, throughout which time there had been many sword principle experts who attempted to subdue it but ended up failing to do so. Su Ming, for instance, had made several attempts but was frustrated each time. The heart-killing sword finally got a new owner, but under the gaze of the experts, the aura on Jian Wushuang's body was impossible to conceal. It was, to everyone's surprise, the aura of a mere Saint Realm expert. A Saint Realm expert. He's only a Saint Realm expert. He not only awakened 3 first-grade sword souls, but more inconceivably, fused them perfectly and metamorphosized them into an all-new sword soul such that even the heart-killing sword would voluntarily submit to him as its owner. To think he's only a Saint Realm expert. The sword principle experts were filled with sourness in their hearts, and many of them looked upon Jian Wushuang with great jealousy. Yes, it was jealousy. Jian Wushuang could sense the incoming envy upon him as well. I believe your recognition of me as your owner is a good thing, but it has also brought me huge trouble. Looking at the sword in his hand, Jian Wushuang sighed lightly as his looks began to turn frosty. It was indeed huge trouble. As the first sword principle magic weapon of killing in the Divine Land, just how many people coveted it? Among this group of sword principle experts alone, 9 out of 10 were eager to obtain it, except that they did not have the capability to do so. And now it had recognized Jian Wushuang as its owner right in front of them. How could they not be jealous and goggle-eyed? The strongest among these people are only of superior lord level. This poses no threat to me at present. There's only one person who's a serious threat to me. With chilly eyes, Jian Wushuang looked right over at Su Ming. The latter was standing upright in the void in his usual lofty pose. He too looked back at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang could vaguely detect the killing intent welling up in Su Ming's eyes despite their dull facade. Indeed, he laughed coldly. He was not in the least bit surprised. Su Ming had suppressed the heart-killing sword for over 1,000 years, throughout which he held a sword principle meeting every 100 years when the sword was in a state of agitation. Though this seemed to be an act of kindness, the reality was that deep down, Su Ming had long treated the sword as if it was his possession. Now that it had recognized Jian Wushuang as its owner instead, the real surprise would have been if Su Ming did not want to kill him. I'd planned to wait a little longer, when my strength has increased some, before taking him on. But it now seems that things have to be brought ahead. Jian Wushuang murmured to himself. Su Ming was a traitor of the bloodline of the sword ancestor. The decline of the bloodline was inextricably linked to Su Ming. As a descendant of the bloodline, it was Jian Wushuang's duty to clean things up on behalf of his ancestors if he had the strength to. It was only a matter of time before he challenged Su Ming. Now, the heart-killing sword had simply brought things forward by a little. The crowd of experts too looked at Su Ming in anticipation of his reaction. However, contrary to everyone's expectation, Su Ming did not fly into a rage. Instead, keeping his eyes on Jian Wushuang, he calmly asked, "Your Excellency's methods are truly awesome to have fused 3 sword souls into one. May I know thy name?" Jian Wushuang first thought about answering swordsman when he heard Su Ming's inquiry, but after thinking for a bit, he replied, "My name is Jian Wushuang." Jian Wushuang. Su Ming muttered it in repeat. It literally means to have matchless sword principle. You certainly live up to such a fine name. False praise. Jian Wushuang was unflattered. That heart-killing sword has remained here in this valley for over 1,000 years. I tried many ways for it to recognize me as its owner but was never successful. Today, however, it has offered itself to your excellency, whose capability certainly puts mine to shame, Su Ming said. It was just luck, Jian Wushuang replied casually. Luck? Maybe. Su Ming's lips raised a corner. But after all, as the first sword principal magic weapon in the Divine Land, it has been eyed by many people. Your Excellency must be careful. Don't get killed so shortly after receiving it, or you mightn't even get to use it. Thanks so much for the tip, Master Su Ming, Jian Wushuang coolly acknowledged. All the best. Su Ming laughed callously, then turned and departed. The sword principal experts were astounded by what had they just seen. Gone? He left just like that. He didn't even try to seize back the sword? Is he really willing to let it fall into Jian Wushuang's hands? Willing? That's impossible. The entire Divine Land knows that Master Su Ming is crazy over the heart-killing sword, or he wouldn't have spent a good 1,000 years suppressing it. My view is that Master Su Ming chose not to act here to save face. This is the Sword Suppression Valley after all, and the fact is he'd personally invited Jian Wushuang here. Plus, the sword submitted itself to Jian Wushuang, who neither actively snatched it nor violated any of the valley's rules. It would be beneath Master Su Ming to tussle for the sword in the valley, and his reputation would be ruined if news spread. Of course, this only holds true in the valley. Things may be different outside. The experts chatted freely among themselves. Though they tried to keep their volumes down, Jian Wushuang could clearly hear what they were saying. In response, he laughed indifferently. He was certainly aware of the theory that Master Su Ming chose not to act outright here only so as to not tarnish his reputation, but would be unable to restrain himself once outside the valley. Inhaling a deep breath, Jian Wushuang kept the heart-killing sword in an interspatial ring before he slowly walked forward. Swordsman, Hanjian Lord and Tianming Lord were both looking at Jian Wushuang with somewhat complicated expressions. The two of you may leave first, Jian Wushuang said. Sorry, swordsman. The two of us are of little help, Hanjian Lord said with some bitterness. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded with genuine empathy. The person he needed to face this time was Su Ming, against whom even their leader Marquis Piaoxue, let alone them, was of no match. He walked up to Jian Nantian once again. The latter carried a flask of wine in his hand and was busy drinking to himself. His face was its usual indifference, and he only looked around when he saw Jian Wushuang coming toward him. I'd thought I'd caused enough trouble during my time, but it has turned out to be a lot less than what you've done. Father, stop teasing me. Jian Wushuang laughed mildly. Su Ming will certainly not let you off for taking the heart-killing sword. I fear that he'll try to murder you upon the very first step you take out of Sword Suppression Valley. Say, what are your plans? Jian Nantian uttered in a deep voice. What else can I do but take such measures as the situation calls for? The sword has already recognized me as its owner, and I surely cannot return it to him. Besides, it was originally the sword ancestor's magic weapon. Su Ming doesn't deserve to have it, Jian Wushuang responded. Of course, although he claimed he would simply take such measures as the situation called for, he did have a few plans deep down. At the very least, he had a life-saving trump card in his hand. You do seem to have quite the open mind. Jian Nantian glanced at his son and lowered his voice before continuing. I've already sent word for a helper to come forth. He'll need some time to get here, however. You just have to find a way to delay things a little. A helper? Jian Wushuang looked in puzzlement at his father. He was going to be acted upon by none other than one of the 9 sovereigns, Su Ming. What kind of helper would be able to stop such a person? Don't worry. The helper whom I asked for is very powerful and should have no problem stopping Su Ming. Jian Nantian laughed easily. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang could not help lifting his eyebrows. He might not have to resort to his final trump card if the helper was truly that capable. Incidentally, he did not really want to use that card. Ladies and gentlemen, the sword principal meeting is over and my lord has his own business to deal with, so I will have to ask you all to leave now, said the purple-clothed woman who had received the experts when they first arrived. The experts left the valley without hesitation after hearing those words. We're being asked to leave. It seems that they don't want us to stay any longer. Jian Wushuang smiled. Let's go, Jian Nantian said flatly. Then, he headed out of the valley with Jian Wushuang. The handsome Su Ming stood at the highest point of the valley, staring at Jian Wushuang's retreating figure off in the distance, with a twisted expression on his face. Zizhong, Su Ming spoke. Your Excellency? A purple-robed man came before him. Follow Jian Wushuang. Once he exits the valley, kill him and bring back the heart-killing sword, Su Ming ordered in a low voice. Yes, Your Excellency. The purple-robed man nodded respectfully and began following Jian Wushuang. The heart-killing sword is mine. No one can take it from me. Su Ming's eyes were as cold as ice. However, outside the valley, the experts had yet to walk away. Instead, they were waiting quietly. Look, those two are Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu. Right outside the exit stood two figures with vigorous auras. They were none other than the two marquises from earlier. The marquises were obviously waiting for Jian Nantian. They had wanted to kill Jian Nantian, but for fear of enraging Su Ming, they had waited until this moment, when everyone exited the valley. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian walked out the valley, side by side. They immediately attracted everyone's attention. They came out. Why are they together? Things have become interesting. If we kill Jian Nantian, we'll get two Dao weapons. One from Jian Nantian and one from Marquis Xiefeng. As for the Jian Wushuang, he's taken possession of the heart-killing sword and even combined 3 sword souls, which is the first time someone has achieved that in our entire history. He must have some big secrets. If we can kill him, we will earn a lot. The experts who were waiting watched Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian very closely. In their eyes, the two were like walking treasures, and killing either one of them could benefit them a lot. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian spotted Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu just as they came out of the valley. They're waiting for you. Jian Wushuang cast Jian Nantian a meaningful eye. Just 2 shrimps, Jian Nantian said in a mocking tone. He despised the 2 marquises even though they were top experts in this land. How about each of us takes one of them? Jian Wushuang asked his father while smiling. His words showed that he did not take the marquises seriously. Fine. Jian Nantian nodded. I'll take Marquis Wanlei and you deal with Marquis Nanyu. No problem. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian charged toward their targets like 2 flowing lights. Their eyes were fixed on Jian Nantian. So Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu immediately rushed forward the moment they saw Jian Nantian move. Jian Nantian, go to hell. The bad-tempered Marquis Wanlei roared. Save your words. Jian Nantian remained indifferent. In the blink of an eye, the 2 forces were already within range for close combat. Marquis Nanyu, your opponent is me. Jian Wushuang's voice echoed. A blurry sword shadow stuck out, cutting through the space in front of Marquis Nanyu and forcing him to defend. Marquis Nanyu took out a saber that was surrounded by knife essence and casually blocked the sword shadow with it. Boy, you dare to fight me? Marquis Nanyu shot Jian Wushuang a chilling glance. The Marquis had witnessed how Jian Wushuang combined his 3 sword souls and gained the heart-killing sword, but he did not believe he was capable of possessing such a magic weapon. Therefore, he was not interested in Jian Wushuang or the heart-killing sword. I've heard of the 72 marquises since I entered the Divine Land, but I haven't had a chance to battle a real Marquis until now, said Jian Wushuang with a smile. Battle me? While you're only in the Saint Realm. Marquis Nanyu glanced at Jian Wushuang with scorn in his eyes. Despite his excellent performance inside the valley, it didn't change the fact that Jian Wushuang was still in the Saint Realm. As for Marquis Nanyu, he was at the 7-Cloud Realm, so he thought that Jian Wushuang was insane to battle him. Boy, since you're in a rush to die, I'll grant your wish and accept your heart-killing sword. As Marquis Nanyu's words fell, he turned into a shadow. Swish! Jian Wushuang only saw an elusive shadow flashing at a high speed, but he could feel a tempestuous killing intent surrounding him. He narrowed his eyes, ready to use the triple-kill sword that was already in his hand. A Marquis in the 7-Cloud Realm doesn't deserve to face the heart-killing sword. Jian Wushuang murmured. Behind him, a golden streak of light began to surge as a giant golden sword soul phantom materialized. The phantom, that was over 50 meters tall, appeared once again. An overwhelming sword essence immediately swept the area. If it had been before Jian Wushuang entered Sword Suppression Valley, he would have fled when facing a marquis. However, things had changed in the valley. He had experienced the 1,000-sword salute and his power had skyrocketed. More than condensing 7 slaughter origin marks, he had also succeeded in combining his sword souls. He could tell that, even though he now only had 1 sword soul phantom, this golden phantom was more powerful than the previous 3 added together and could allow him to display even more power. I can't wait to see how powerful my new sword soul is. Jian Wushuang licked his lips. The space in front of him was sliced open as Marquis Nanyu's saber drew near. The blow split the air, and before it even struck Jian Wushuang, its waves had already left a bottomless saber mark on the land below them. Jian Wushuang's eyes darkened as he leaped forward and swung the triple-kill sword at his opponent. The sword light was like a bolt of lightning that would continue moving forward until it struck its enemies. Jian Wushuang displayed the second move of the heart-killing sword technique, Desperation. The golden sword soul phantom that was behind Jian Wushuang also attacked at the same time. The power from his sword soul exploded forth. At the same time, the 7 slaughter origin marks were activated and released their full power. The sword light became as dazzling as the sun. Marquis Nanyu's killing intent continued increasing and his blow became even more fierce. Die! He growled hoarsely, with a grim look on his face. The two faced each other head-on, and they both used their full power. Neither one of them was taking it easy. Marquis Nanyu, as a marquis in the 7-Cloud realm, was quite confident about his power. He intended to defeat this insignificant opponent, who was only in the Saint realm, using a single strike. However, his opponent, Jian Wushuang, also had confidence in his strength. With only his 7 slaughter origin marks, he might be slightly inferior to Marquis Nanyu, but he also had the heavenly creation skill and a strong body to help make up the difference, as well as the heart-killing sword technique from the sword ancestor. Most importantly, he had his sword soul. He was backed by the power of the strongest sword soul. All added together, Jian Wushuang's attack was something that could shake the world. Boom! The 2 blows collided and the 2 formidable forces exploded. The whole area quivered as a visible blast wave swept over everything as it rippled out from the point of impact. It caused the sky to tremble and the ground to crack open. When the blast wave hit a mountain, the mountain was crushed into dust. Step back! The experts who had been watching the battle from off in the distance drew back even farther when they saw the wave, afraid to unintentionally get involved. The whole battlefield was a surging storm of power. Swish! Suddenly, a figure shot out from the storm like a bullet. The figure kept rolling as he flew backwards, and didn't stop until he was hundreds of meters away. After regaining his balance, the figure's face flushed red, and he spat out a mouthful of blood onto the ground. Opposite the figure, a youthful figure walked out of the storm with a long sword in hand. The young figure was Jian Wushuang. Your power doesn't live up to your name, Marquis Nanyu. His words resounded throughout the area. The onlookers were muddled by what they had seen. Marquis Nanyu was not weaker than them. How is this possible? I'm a marquis, in the 7-Cloud realm. He is only in the Saint realm. How could I be overpowered by him when fighting head-to-head? He was completely overpowered. He had been knocked back hundreds of meters by that one strike and was injured to the point that he coughed up blood. But it should have been Jian Wushuang that was overpowered, not him. The result was totally beyond the Marquis's expectations. How could that boy defeat a Marquis? Confusion rocked everyone's mind. They were all in shock because they didn't know that Jian Wushuang was not just an ordinary expert in the Saint realm. His cultivation followed a path that defied the heavens with every step he took. A normal Saint realm expert would step into the Cloud realm after condensing 3 origin marks, but Jian Wushuang had condensed 7 origin marks, which was the same number of marks as Marquis Nanyu. The difference was that Jian Wushuang possessed origin marks while the Marquis had clouds, which were much more powerful. Jian Wushuang had overcome the difference by depending on the heavenly creation skill and his strong body. That was to say, even without his sword soul, Jian Wushuang still had a chance of beating Marquis Nanyu. But, by using it, he was able to overpower him. Jian Wushuang stood there, towering above him, holding a sword. As he pointed forward, a vast blood river flowed in that direction. Relying on his current power, he could cover the whole battlefield with road to the underworld. He displayed both the hundredfold realm and blood-fire domain at the same time. The three techniques worked together and suppressed Marquis Nanyu. Damn! Marquis Nanyu's expression changed. He was being suppressed by a mighty force and was not able to display his full power. He didn't do his best. Marquis Nanyu shot Jian Wushuang a horrified look, at which point he noticed a trace of killing intent in Jian Wushuang's eyes. The Marquis became frightened out of his wits. It never occurred to him that he would fear someone in the Saint Realm to such an extent, but he was truly afraid. He knew that he was no match for Jian Wushuang. Run! Marquis Nanyu began to flee without any hesitation. He was too frightened to think of protecting his reputation. Regardless of whether it was fame, treasures, or Dao weapons, nothing mattered more than his life. You want to run away? You're running nowhere. Seeing Marquis Nanyu's intention, Jian Wushuang smiled coldly. With a flash, he left behind a shadow as he moved effortlessly through the blood river. It only took him an instant to catch up with Marquis Nanyu. Marquis Nanyu, go to hell. Indifferent words escaped Jian Wushuang's mouth, sentencing Marquis Nanyu to death. Marquis Nanyu turned around upon hearing the words and saw Jian Wushuang's sword flying towards him like lightning again. The sword was so fast that he knew he had no chance, even if he had not been suppressed by the realm technique. No! Marquis Nanyu screamed miserably before he was pierced by the triple-kill sword. Marquis Nanyu died with his eyes wide opened. His body fell from the air. The place was dead silent and the onlookers were stunned. A super expert in the Divine Land, one of the 72 Marquises, Marquis Nanyu, was killed before their very eyes, and it was done by a Saint Realm expert. A Saint Realm expert killed a Marquis with using his full power, and Marquis Nanyu couldn't even run away. Jian Wushuang is indeed powerful. I never thought there would be such a horrifying Saint Realm expert in the Divine Land. How could a Saint Realm expert be so strong? Everyone was completely shocked. However, before they could calm down, another daunting force exploded from a different battlefield. An enchanting sword shadow came into view and attracted everyone's attention. The attack was mysterious, and the power behind it reached its peak because of the Dao weapon. Jian Nantian, who launched the attack, looked indifferent, but there was still a hint of killing intent gathered in his eyes. Shit! Marquis Wanlei, Jian Nanshan's opponent, turned pale when he saw the attack, but he still tried to block it. However, Jian Nanshan's sword still knocked his giant axe away and pierced straight through him. Marquis Wanlei had been killed as well. He died because he had underestimated Jian Nantian. He didn't know that before the 1,000-sword salute took place, Jian Nantian had already killed a superior lord and 2 advanced lords with a single blow. At that time, he was already as powerful as an ordinary marquis. With a great opportunity like the 1,000-sword salute, it was only natural that Jian Nantian had progressed a lot. Besides that, Jian Nantian had stepped into the Seven-Cloud realm. He possessed excellent swordsmanship, and he also had a Dao weapon. Thus, he was definitely much more powerful than Marquis Wanlei. In such a short amount of time, both Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu had been killed. However, Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian did not appear to be proud. They knew very well that the 2 Marquises were just ordinary Seven-Cloud realm experts without any Dao weapons. They regarded them as shrimps and had not taken them seriously from the very beginning. The one behind the 2 was their real concern. He's here. Jian Nanshan's dark eyes turned towards the sky, where a figure off in the distance was slowly becoming more and more clear. Behind the figure was a large red cloud. A moment later, the figure finally arrived in front of Jian Nantian. The figure wore a red robe and had red hair. He carried a blood-red saber on his back and turbulent red clouds following behind him. Standing there, he seemed like an Azura from the hell. Jian Nantian. The figure's eyes were fixed on Jian Nantian with a barely suppressed killing intent in them. Marquis Xiefeng, Jian Nantian replied calmly. The figure, Marquis Xiefeng, was extremely powerful and had been chasing after Jian Nantian during these last few days. He even offered a Dao weapon to anyone who could kill Jian Nantian. Being ranked within the top 2 among the 72 marquises in the Divine Land demonstrated how powerful he was. The dead Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu were marquises as well, but they were no match for Marquis Xiefeng. Marquis Xiefeng appeared on the battlefield with a killing intent that was so overwhelming the onlookers could not help holding their breath. The Marquis looked down at Marquis Wanlei's dead body. It seems that your power increased substantially during the meeting. You were even able to kill Wanlei, Marquis Xiefeng said icily. However, I still look down on you, and you will see how miserably the murderer of my sworn brothers will end. Really? Show me then. Jian Nantian stared at Marquis Xiefeng calmly. You're courting death. Without wasting any more words, Marquis Xiefeng began to move forward, and the turbulent red cloud that filled sky behind him moved forward as well. 3 sword soul phantoms shot up behind Jian Nantian and rushed towards the Marquis while radiating an overwhelming sword essence. Marquis Xiefeng. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes while watching the scene taking place in front of him. Marquis Xiefeng is in the 8 Cloud realm and possesses a Dao weapon. He is much more powerful than Wanlei. I hope Father can deal with him. Jian Wushuang was lost in thought when a purple streak of flowing light suddenly emerged in front of him. Eh? Jian Wushuang looked toward the light and realized it was a man. He was a burly man, clothed in purple. His grand aura revealed his identity as a marquis, one that was more powerful than Marquis Nanyu. He is Marquis Zizhong. Someone recognized the man and called out his name in surprise. Marquis Zizhong was a top marquis among the 72 marquises in the Divine Land. He was also in the 8 Cloud realm, and he even possessed a Dao weapon, so he was just a little bit weaker than Marquis Xiefeng. Jian Wushuang. Marquis Zizhong looked toward Jian Wushuang as his frigid voice echoed. Give me the heart-killing sword and I'll spare your life. Spare my life? Don't talk like you can kill me. Marquis Zizhong, you don't have the ability to take my life. So tell your boss to come out and do it himself, Jian Wushuang said with a sneer. Jian Wushuang knew very well that Marquis Zizhong was trying to seize the heart-killing sword under someone's order. There was no doubt that the person who gave him the order was Su Ming. No need to call anyone else. I can kill you on my own. Marquis Zizhong's expression was ice-cold as he gripped the Saiyan long spear in his hand, the head of which was sharp and gleamed with a metallic luster. Marquis Zizhong made a sudden move and the spear pierced through the air, approaching Jian Wushuang. So fast. Jian Wushuang frowned, but his eyes were filled with battle intent. Good. Since you want to fight, let's fight. Boom. The 18-foot-tall golden sword soul phantom was like a matchless fiend beneath the heavens. As Jian Wushuang began marching forward, this golden sword soul phantom also suddenly stepped forward and swung its long sword. Power instantly erupted from the sword soul and fought with Marquis Zizhong head-on. Then, the boundless blood river gushed out toward Marquis Zizhong to restrain him. Previously, Jian Wushuang almost had to use his full strength to seriously injure Marquis Nanyu while he was using a normal sword, but the battle strength of Marquis Zizhong was obviously superior to that of Marquis Nanyu. With the power of the Dao weapon in hand, Marquis Zizhong and Jian Wushuang were evenly matched in one-on-one close combat, both in speed and skill. But now Marquis Zizhong could only grapple with Jian Wushuang. As for what he said earlier about slaying Jian Wushuang, it was obviously impossible. In this regard, Marquis Zizhong was helplessly reaching his limit. His Excellency, Su Ming wanted me to slay Jian Wushuang and bring back the heart-killing sword. But who would have thought that this boy was only in the Saint Realm? How is his battle strength this incredible? Marquis Zizhong thought, from the bottom of his heart. Before Jian Wushuang and Marquis Nanyu's one-on-one fight, Marquis Zizhong also thought he knew what the outcome would be, but after seeing Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship severely injure Marquis Nanyu, he knew that he would not be able to kill Jian Wushuang alone. We can only wait for His Excellency, Su Ming, to handle this. Marquis Zizhong seemed to have intentionally or unintentionally been searching the surrounding area. He knew that His Excellency, Su Ming, must be hiding somewhere close, but he just hadn't appeared. It was because of this that he knew he couldn't kill Jian Wushuang. Yet he was fighting like crazy with Jian Wushuang trying to kill him. He just wanted Su Ming to see that he had tried his best, and that the opponent was too strong for him to kill. On the battlefield, the fierce battle between Jian Wushuang and Marquis Zizhong had reached the white-hot stage. The two men were colliding head-on and turning into residual shadows from time to time, then chasing and dodging each other at an alarming speed within the battlefield. But no matter how hard they fought, it was difficult to tell who would win or lose. Marquis Zizhong is worthy of the title Marquis. I'm afraid that even 10 Marquis Nanyas combined couldn't be compared to him, thought Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, who was in the middle of the fight, suddenly looked at Marquis Zizhong and said, "Your strength demands that I use the heart-killing sword." Jian Wushuang's voice instantly lowered and his wrist moved. The triple-kill sword disappeared, replaced by a wicked long sword that exuded an unusually bloodthirsty sensation. "This is the first time I have used this sword. I wonder how powerful it is," Jian Wushuang thought and then smirked. However, this smirk caused the facial expression of Marquis Zizhong to change greatly. Damn it! When Marquis Zizhong saw the wicked long sword in Jian Wushuang's hand, his pupils suddenly contracted. The heart-killing sword was the #1 killing sword in the vast divine land. Marquis Zizhong didn't know how powerful it was. He only knew that Jian Wushuang fought to a draw with him while using the triple-kill sword, which was merely a first-grade magic weapon. Now, if he used the heart-killing sword... After all, the heart-killing sword is the best weapon for someone who practices sword principle. With Jian Wushuang's strength, he only needs to show a little bit of its power, and he will be able to completely suppress me, Marquis Zizhong thought fearfully. When he saw Jian Wushuang preparing to use the heart-killing sword, a sense of unrest began to grow in Marquis Zizhong's heart. However, even though he wanted to leave, he was already being suppressed by Jian Wushuang's Blood River realm, which prevented him from leaving without Jian Wushuang's permission. Jian Wushuang's residual shadow gradually disappeared from where he had just been, and a vibrating ghost-like figure instantly moved through the Blood River, appearing in front of Marquis Zizhong. A sword slash immediately swept out, accompanied by a slicing sound. This sword, carrying a decisive and unwavering intent, was the second move of the heart-killing sword technique, Desperation. As if acknowledging Jian Wushuang as its master, the heart-killing sword shook crazily at that moment and exploded with power that soared to the heavens. Jian Wushuang's attack seemed to have reached the pinnacle of terror. Perhaps another person could display similar swordsmanship, but Jian Wushuang had performed a secret technique of the heart-killing sword, Desperation. If it was compared to the power released when he used the triple-kill sword, this time the technique was several times more powerful. I can't stop this sword strike. Seeing this attack in action, and feeling the immense power it emanated, Marquis Zizhong wore a terrified look on his face. However, the sword did not land on Marquis Zizhong's body. Instead, it struck the space in front of him. The empty space was torn apart, and a white-robed human figure immediately emerged from it. As soon as the white-robed man appeared, he countered with a strong sword essence. This sword essence, with just its first counterattack, pushed almost everything back towards Jian Wushuang, causing Jian Wushuang to become unsettled and the sword in his hand to become still. After regaining his stance and composure, Jian Wushuang squinted to get a better look at this newcomer. The large number of sword principle experts in the area, who were watching the fight, all focused their attention on the white-robed man who suddenly appeared. Has he really come? They wondered. None of the sword principle experts were surprised by the unexpected appearance of the white-robed man. Everyone knew that he would never give up on the heart-killing sword so easily. Jian Wushuang also gazed at the newcomer. The corners of the white-robed man's mouth were smeared with a peculiar curve like paint. It's finally unbearable, spoke the white-robed man. The white-robed man, with a handsome demon-like face, was one of the 9 sovereigns in the vast divine land and also the owner of Sword Suppression Valley, Sword Demon, Su Ming. Su Ming had suppressed the heart-killing sword in Sword Suppression Valley for thousands of years. He already regarded the heart-killing sword as his own. At the Sword Principal meeting in Sword Suppression Valley, the heart-killing sword had been acknowledged as one of the most powerful weapons. Would Su Ming willingly let it go? While they were inside the Sword Suppression Valley, Su Ming was afraid of losing his prestige and reputation since it was inappropriate for him to handle this matter in the presence of guests. Even outside of the Sword Suppression Valley, Su Ming allowed Marquis Zizhong to try settling matters first while he stayed in the dark. He still could not come forward, so he naturally did not come forward. But when he realized Marquis Zizhong also could not deal with Jian Wushuang, he had no alternative but to do it himself. His Excellency Su Ming, said Marquis Zizhong while bowing respectfully. I have tried my best. Marquis Zizhong finished what he wanted to say. I noticed, Su Ming answered. Then he nodded and gestured a dismissive wave towards Marquis Zizhong. It was appropriate for Marquis Zizhong to step aside. He knew that the arrival of Su Ming meant he was no longer needed. Su Ming still possessed his arrogant posture while looking at Jian Wushuang, who stood directly in front of him. When he saw the heart-killing sword in Jian Wushuang's hand, his pupils secretly narrowed in on it. He immediately revealed a cold smile. The sword is good, but the one who is using it is too weak, remarked Su Ming. Ha ha! Your Excellency, Su Ming is right. I am weak. I cannot even use 10% of the heart-killing sword's power. However, it doesn't matter how much of its power I can use, because I'm still better off than the people who don't even have enough ability to be recognized by the heart-killing sword. All they can do is look on in despair, right? Jian Wushuang responded while smiling. Those who were not qualified can only look on in despair? Upon hearing this, numerous sword principal experts suddenly had an odd look on their faces. Obviously, Jian Wushuang was mocking Su Ming. After all, Su Ming had possessed the heart-killing sword for thousands of years, but he had not been able to bind it. How bold! Su Ming said, as a silver of coldness flashed through his beautiful face. He stared at Jian Wushuang. It's been a long time since someone dared talk to me like this. Since you've said so much, you won't be able to leave here. Even if I had not said those words, you would not let me go, right? Jian Wushuang wore a cold smile. Su Ming, you don't have to pretend to be noble. If you want the heart-killing sword, make your move. Since you are courting death, I will make your dream come true, Su Ming said. Then a sword appeared in his hands. It was a dreamlike sword with an almost transparent body. Su Ming held the sword while radiating an overwhelming sword essence. Jian Wushuang looked grim. Sword Demon Su Ming was different from Marquis Nanyu and Marquis Zizhong. Though he was at the Eight-Cloud realm, he had reached the Tao. The Tao was the supreme level superior to the origin. If an expert reached the Tao, his strength would experience a dramatic change. Boy, are you ready to die? Su Ming stared at Jian Wushuang as if he was looking at a dead person. Come on. Jian Wushuang gripped the heart-killing sword tightly, while the 180-foot golden sword Soul Phantom emanated a mighty aura. Su Ming sneered. Then he casually swung his dreamlike long sword. It seemed like a casual and slow movement. However, the moment he attacked, a colorful, dreamlike sword light appeared in the sky. The streak of sword light was charming. Jian Wushuang was shocked. In that instant he saw a different scene. Schwanger! Schwanger! Help! Help! Jian Wushuang heard a terrified voice and looked over. He saw his father, who had been indifferent earlier, fleeing in panic while being chased by a grinning Marquis Xiefeng who was brandishing his saber. Dad! Jian Wushuang panicked. No! Jian Nantian uttered a forlorn scream. Jian Wushuang saw his father's body being split in two by Marquis Xiefeng. He was shocked, but he immediately realized that it was not real. Illusion! It's an illusion! Wake up! Be quick! Jian Wushuang snarled in his heart. He suddenly gritted his teeth and tried his best to disentangle himself from the illusion. When he regained consciousness, he noticed that the heart-stopping attack was less than 1 meter away from him. He had no chance of parrying it, so he could only try to dodge. Su Ming had originally aimed his attack at the young man's head, but Jian Wushuang moved, so the sword light passed by next to his ear and landed on his right shoulder. Whoosh! A huge sword wound appeared on his shoulder and blood began flowing out of it. Luckily, Jian Wushuang had a powerful body. Otherwise, his right arm would have been chopped off. While ignoring the sharp pain in his arm, Jian Wushuang quickly retreated. Su Ming still stood in the air, slowly sheathing his long sword. You were able to escape from my illusory sword principle. Very impressive. Su Ming sneered while looking at the young man. Jian Wushuang was terrified. He did not expect Su Ming to possess a swordsmanship which contained a terrifying illusion. Illusory sword principle? Jian Wushuang could not help nodding in private. The Tao was worthy of being the supreme level superior to the origin. It was terrifying indeed. If he had not reacted to the attack in time, his head would have been split in half. My illusory sword principle is marvelous. Few marquises could parry it. You should be proud of yourself since you did not die from that attack, Su Ming said. Jian Wushuang looked grim and began activating the soul-devouring secret skill in his mind. Soul-devouring secret skill. Jian Wushuang had not used soul-devouring secret skill ever since he arrived at the Divine Land. Placed a heavy burden on his body. So, unless it was a critical moment, Jian Wushuang was unwilling to use it. He had not experienced a truly desperate fight in the Divine Land yet. But now, he had to rely on it to save himself. Jian Wushuang instantly radiated a terrifying power which seemed like it could devour everything. He was activating the second volume of the soul-devouring secret skill, the highest level. Boom! In an instant, the whole area began to shake. Jian Wushuang's body seemed to be a black hole that could devour everything as a stream of natural power from everything in the area began rushing into his body at an amazing speed. The ground below became dry and cracked. In the blink of an eye, the land within a radius of dozens of meters had become lifeless. The spectators were panic-stricken. What a frightening skill! What happened? He is actually devouring natural power? The spectators exclaimed in amazement. Just a small trick, Su Ming sneered. Eventually, Jian Wushuang stopped devouring the energy, but his aura had already improved to a new level. Of course, it also placed a heavy burden on him. Jian Wushuang pointed towards the space ahead of him with his blood-red eyes. Azura secret skill, Bridge of Helplessness. Buzz. A terrifying power erupted and a huge blood bridge appeared above the blood river, slowly stretching toward the end of the river. Jian Wushuang, who was covered by a scarlet armor, stepped onto the bridge. Jian Wushuang's aura soared once again. He glanced at Su Ming. Then, in the next moment, he moved. Whoosh! A streak of flowing light darted out. Now, a mighty blood river was surging towards Su Ming. Jian Wushuang appeared in front of his opponent, and the heart-killing sword let out a shrill whistle as the 180-foot golden sword Soul Phantom attacked with a long sword. It was a brilliant, intoxicating stroke. The spectators could not help but be enchanted by it. It was the third move of the heart-killing sword technique, Enchant. Jian Wushuang had just recently comprehended it when he saw the Thousand Sword Salute. The first move of the heart-killing sword technique was relatively weak, but each move was stronger than the previous one. Therefore, the third move was obviously more powerful than the second one, Desperation. Even a marquis would be terrified by the power of this brilliant attack. But Su Ming sneered while casually brandishing his dreamlike longsword again. As a result, Jian Wushuang's strongest move was easily deflected by him. He blocked my attack so easily? Jian Wushuang was astonished. He used his full strength to perform soul-devouring secret skill and used the heart-killing sword to perform his strongest move, which was powerful enough to kill any marquis. But Su Ming easily parried it. Both sovereigns and marquises were at the Cloud Realm, but was the former really that much stronger than the latter? Humph! Jian Wushuang snorted. He immediately struck out with several palms in succession. Azura secret skill, 18 levels of hell. Buzz. A mighty power erupted as a towering scarlet pavilion descended into the mighty blood river. It had 18 floors with ghost shadows visible on each floor, as its overwhelming power began surging towards Su Ming. At this moment, A sword light also gushed out of Jian Wushuang's mind's eye. Instantly, a terrifying sword essence shot out. It was the first-grade sword technique, Mind's Eye. Ever since he first learned this sword skill, he had been storing sword essence between his eyes, but he rarely had an opportunity to use it, so the sword essence became more and more powerful. At this moment, he released all of the sword essence he had been saving at once. The stream of sword essence changed into a streak of dazzling sword light, lashing out with a power strong enough to kill a marquis. Su Ming stood there peacefully. Even though the lofty scarlet pavilion suppressed him, he was only shocked for a second and still kept his calm. In the blink of an eye, the overwhelming sword essence had appeared before Su Ming. Su Ming snorted. When he raised his head, his mind's eye suddenly split and unleashed a gush of sword essence, which was more powerful than what Jian Wushuang released. He easily blocked the attack from the mind's eye sword technique. After seeing that, Jian Wushuang stared at his opponent with an extremely cold look and said, "Time for my last killing move." Su Ming frowned and felt something happen behind him. At the same time as he smashed the sword essence, a streak of golden light with an overwhelming power rushed toward his back at a terrifying speed. A scarlet figure with a cold look stood behind him while holding a gold longbow, the Dragon King Bao. The golden light, which was not far from Su Ming, was actually the Dragon King arrow with icy heart poison. The blood puppet and Dragon King arrow were Jian Wushuang's final killing move. Jian Wushuang had performed some powerful techniques, but he did not actually expect those skills to kill Su Ming. His only hope was the Dragon King arrow, or, more precisely, the icy heart poison that was on it. As long as the Dragon King arrow scratched Su Ming's skin, the icy heart poison should be strong enough to kill him. Therefore, Jian Wushuang let Blood Puppet wait at the side for an opportunity to launch this killing move. Jian Wushuang had an ingenious plan. He exerted his full strength to perform techniques that would attract his opponent's attention, especially the 18 levels of hell, which shocked Su Ming. Then the Mind's Eye sword technique and Dragon King arrow were displayed in succession so that Su Ming would not notice the second attack. When the golden light was 1 meter away from him, he finally felt it. At such a close distance, Su Ming was utterly unable to react. "I succeeded." A flicker of delight flashed through his eyes. He watched as the Dragon King arrow pierced Su Ming. However, no blood appeared. The Dragon King arrow did not seem to touch anything and continued shooting forward at its previous speed. Swish! The gold light, like a comet with a long tail, eventually landed on a nearby mountain. The Dragon King arrow left a big hole on the mountainside. As the icy heart poison pervaded the mountain, the huge mountain became white and was quickly covered by an icy fog. Clap! At this point, the mountain cracked into pieces. It chilled all the spectators to the bone. Tut! What a terrifying toxin! Luckily, I have the illusory sword principle, or I would have been wounded and killed by your toxin. Cold laughter rang out. Jian Wushuang saw Su Ming speak again with a completely uninjured body. How is that possible? The Dragon King arrow obviously pierced his body. Jian Wushuang turned pale. He thought his killing move worked. Normally, Su Ming should not have been able to dodge it, but Su Ming had actually succeeded in escaping. It must be because of his illusory sword principle, Jian Wushuang thought to himself. The Tao was mysterious, so it was normal that Su Ming had some remarkable abilities. Boy, you're just a Saint Realm expert, but your skills are amazing. What a pity. It's meaningless in front of real strength. Su Ming wore a faint smile while his dreamlike longsword became dazzling. Go to hell, Su Ming said. He lifted his dreamlike longsword up and was about to attack again. Jian Wushuang was frightened at this moment. He had experienced illusory sword principle. The illusion was so real that he did not have the confidence to deal with it. Buzz! A flow of immaterial sword essence suddenly rose nearby. It looked somewhat bleak and sad, but it aroused Su Ming's attention. This sovereign stopped and looked over toward the source of the sword essence. An old figure slowly walked over. He was a scruffy elder with white hair and black skin. On his skinny face there were many black freckles. He opened his eyes, but his pupils were white. Obviously, he was blind. All the sword principle experts could not help but look at him. Jian Nantian was fighting fiercely with Marquis Xiefeng, and it was hard to tell who would be the winner. However, when the scruffy elder appeared, Jian Nantian smiled faintly. He finally came? The blind, scruffy elder was the person Jian Nantian had asked for help. The scruffy elder took stout steps and stopped by Jian Wushuang's side. Su Ming, who had been arrogant, looked at the scruffy elder with a cold look. "Blind man, you are still alive," Su Ming said coldly. "You, a traitor, are still alive. Why should I die so easily?" The scruffy elder said indifferently. "Traitor." Jian Wushuang was intrigued by this information. Judging from the way the elder spoke, Jian Wushuang knew he also belonged to the bloodline of the sword ancestor. "This?" Marquis Zizhong curiously stared at the scruffy elder. Then his expression changed as he became shocked and terrified. "Blind Emperor! It's you!" Marquis Zizhong cried in an unbelievable tone. His voice reverberated through the whole area. Numerous sword principle experts heard those two words. Exclamations rang out in succession. "Blind Emperor? Which one?" "He is Blind Emperor, one of the 7 sword emperors from the bloodline of the sword ancestor? Right, that's him. Except for him, who else would dare to call himself Blind Emperor in the divine land? He didn't die?" Numerous sword principle experts were shocked. Many of them were knowledgeable, so they knew that the bloodline of the sword ancestor was the overlord of the divine land thousands of years ago, and that apart from sword ancestor the 7 sword emperors were the strongest. Each one of the sword emperors was a supreme expert. It was said that the top 3 had reached the Tao and had the battle strength of a sovereign. For thousands of years, sword ancestor and the 7 sword emperor were the backbones of the sword ancestor's bloodline. No force could stand up to them. Even the 3 ancestors could not fight against the bloodline of the sword ancestor. Blind Emperor was one of the 7. No one in the area had expected that Blind Emperor was still alive. Thousands of years ago, the bloodline of the sword ancestor suffered some dramatic changes. Sword ancestor died and his bloodline collapsed. Numerous experts and disciples were killed and only a few escaped to the Nanyang continent. It was said that the 7 sword emperors were killed. Now, Blind Emperor had reappeared in front of everyone. "Blind man, you actually survived that fight thousands of years ago. You're quite lucky." Su Ming stared at Blind Emperor and sneered. "Now you want to save this boy? Since I'm here, I won't let you be so unbridled," Blind Emperor said in a low voice. "Only you? How could you block me?" Su Ming smiled with scorn. "Have a try. You'll understand." Blind Emperor snorted and a sword appeared in his hand. "That is..." Jian Wushuang was shocked. The sword was similar to his triple kill sword in form, size, and color, but this sword was more powerful. It had reached the Tao weapon level. Blind Emperor swung the long sword and stabbed forward. Shua! The spectators who comprehended sword principle were dumbfounded because they saw Blind Emperor stab at nothing. Blind Emperor has not only lost his sight, but also his senses as well? Many experts thought. They did not understand why Blind Emperor launched such an attack, but they were shocked by what happened next. A figure suddenly appeared in the empty space where Blind Emperor stabbed. It was Su Ming. What? The spectators were stunned. They did not know what on earth had happened. Only Jian Wushuang realized the reason. "No wonder I missed him with my Dragon King arrow. I actually fell into his illusion from the beginning. He let his phantom appear in one spot while his real body stayed in another." Jian Wushuang thought in private. The Dragon King arrow had only pierced the phantom Su Ming created, so it did not hurt him. The combination of swordsmanship and illusion formed the illusory sword principle that Su Ming comprehended. Blind Emperor saw through it, so he knew where the real Su Ming was hiding. Su Ming turned pale. He barely deflected the attack and immediately drew back. After regaining his balance, Su Ming looked at Blind Emperor with a flicker of coldness in his eyes. "Blind man, it's been a long time since we last met. Your strength has improved greatly. I knew that you had been studying Heart Sword Principle. It seems that you have finally achieved something. I'm blind, but my heart is not. Your illusion is useless against me. As long as I'm here, you won't be able to hurt this boy, Blind Emperor said indifferently. Su Ming's face fell. His illusory sword principle did not work against those who possessed a strong mind. The heart sword principle focused on one's heart and could counteract the effect from the illusory sword principle. Therefore, Su Ming could not find an opportunity to kill the boy. Blind man, you really think you can stop me? Su Ming coldly looked at Blind Emperor. Nonsense, Blind Emperor said in a low tone. Well, Su Ming wore cold expressions as his eyes blazed with fury, but he remained silent for a while. As his lips tilted upwards slightly at the corners, he gave a wicked smile and said, Blind man, you think that because you're here I can't kill this boy? Blind Emperor had an indifferent expression. Ha ha, ha ha ha. Su Ming broke into demented laughter. After a while, he calmed down and looked at his opponents with a cold expression. I didn't want to, but you've forced me to do it. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang had a bad feeling. Su Ming, what are you going to do? Blind Emperor spoke in a cold voice. What shall I do? Ha ha! Su Ming said with a big laugh. Old man, thousands of years ago, Sword Ancestor died and his bloodline collapsed. You, one of the 7 Sword Emperors, narrowly escaped, but you still don't know the cause of that fight, right? Blind Emperor was shocked. He began shivering. Thousands of years ago, the fight started suddenly and ended quickly. The bloodline of the Sword Ancestor was so powerful that no one dared to piss them off. Even the other 3 ancestors held them in awe. However, a fight erupted, causing Sword Ancestor to die and his bloodline to collapse within a day. Other than Blind Emperor, the other 6 Sword Emperors had all been killed. It had been an absolute nightmare for Blind Emperor. Thousands of years had passed, but Blind Emperor still knew nothing about the cause of the fight. He was not clear on why it started and why Sword Ancestor died. He had not found the answer even now. Su Ming, what do you mean? Blind Emperor said in a tremulous tone. Su Ming said with a grim smile, casting his gaze on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, if I guessed right, you're a descendant from the bloodline of the Sword Ancestor, right? When you came to Sword Suppression Valley, I knew because you had the triple kill sword. The triple kill sword is a token of the bloodline of the Sword Ancestor. It was modeled after the heart-killing sword. The bloodline of the Sword Ancestor refined 5 triple kill swords and gave them to 5 personal disciples. I'm one of the 5, so I also have one. Then Su Ming turned his hand over and a long sword appeared. This sword was the same as Jian Wushuang's triple kill sword and Blind Emperor's long sword. You not only have the triple kill sword, but you have also mastered many sword skills from the bloodline of the Sword Ancestor, such as Mind's Eye sword technique and Multifold Realm, which was famous because of the bloodline of the Sword Ancestor. In addition, you know how to perform the heart-killing sword technique. Su Ming sneered. As Sword Ancestor's personal disciple, Su Ming remembered all 9 moves of the heart-killing sword technique, so he knew it well. He recognized it when Jian Wushuang performed heart-killing sword technique. I'm the descendant of bloodline of the Sword Ancestor. So what? Jian Wushuang said in a cold voice. Since Su Ming knew it, Jian Wushuang admitted his identity openly. Su Ming sneered. It doesn't matter that you're the descendant of bloodline of the Sword Ancestor, but you've mastered the heart-killing sword technique. That's different. Both of us have grasped the heart-killing sword technique, so you must know how marvelous the sword skill is. We can keep this skill in mind and freely perform it, but we can't teach it to others. Sword Ancestor's personal disciples, who mastered the heart-killing sword technique, can't teach it to anyone. You mastered this skill after the bloodline of the Sword Ancestor collapsed. There's only one possibility. You found the location of the cave mansion Sword Ancestor left, and you've been there. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang's expression changed slightly, and his grim sense of foreboding continued to increase. Su Ming continued, Hey, blind man, don't you want to know how the old guy died? I'll tell you now. He died because he had something related to a big secret. This secret is so big that all the other experts who were as strong as him would pay any price to acquire it. Sometimes, Just possessing a treasure is enough to cause trouble for its owner. Because of that thing, he died. However, the old guy was clever and hid it in his cave mansion. As we all know, the mansion's location remains a mystery. The experts who killed the old guy searched the whole divine land, but they could not find the cave mansion. But now, if they received the news that Jian Wushuang knows its location and has practiced the heart-killing sword technique in there, say, what would they do? On hearing this, Jian Wushuang's and Blind Emperor's faces fell. Ha ha! Sword Ancestor's cave mansion. Su Ming crazily laughed without scruple. Jian Wushuang was frightened. In the Ancestor's land, he asked Jin Ling about the third test, but Jin Ling just said that she only knew it was related to a big secret. Now he realized that the big secret was the cause of Sword Ancestor's death. What does he want to do? Jian Nantian appeared beside his son. Jian Nantian remained deadlocked with Marquis Xiefeng. But when he noticed something happening here, Jian Nantian came over. I don't know, but it can't be anything good, Blind Emperor replied coldly. Su Ming stopped laughing. His expression became ferocious with a gush of craziness in his eyes. Jian Wushuang, Blind Emperor, and Jian Nantian. Su Ming looked at them. Have you experienced desperation? Jian Wushuang's complexion changed slightly. Jian Nantian was shocked. Desperation? Hey, it's all right if you haven't because you will be experiencing it soon. Like Sword Ancestor, you will know what real desperation is. I will give you a taste of being targeted by the whole world, Su Ming said with a grim smile as he flipped his hand over. A dozen messaging slips appeared in his hands. After he tore one of them, a blurry image appeared. Haha, Holy Ancestor, you have been looking for the location of the Sword Ancestor cave mansion, right? I found it. The blurry figure showed a surprised expression and spoke in a sonorous voice. I'll come immediately. The blurry figure disappeared. Then Su Ming tore the second messaging slip. Spirit Ancestor, I have some information about the Sword Ancestor cave mansion. Whether you come is up to you. The message was sent. Then he turned to the third messaging slip. Stone Ancestor, I received news on the Sword Ancestor cave mansion. Blood Bladesman, I know the whereabouts of that thing you want. Bagu Cave Master, you're still in closed-door cultivation? If you don't exit, the thing you want will fall into someone else's hands. Dong Ming King. Su Ming tore the messaging slips and sent all the messages. The first 3 messages were to the 3 ancestors in the Divine Land. As for the other messages, such as Blood Bladesman, Bagu Cave Master, and Dong Ming King, many sword principle experts present, including Blind Emperor, had not heard of them. We're in big trouble. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian both looked at each other with a horrible expression. They knew that they would become the experts' targets if Sword Ancestor's death was really related to that thing. Not good, Jian Nantian. Leave with your son right now. I'll block Su Ming. Blind Emperor spoke seriously. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded. Let's go. Jian Wushuang retreated with his father without hesitation. You want to leave? Su Ming sneered as he moved to give chase. Shua! The space before Su Ming suddenly split. A cold sword shadow appeared and pointed at his throat, blocking his way. You think that if you block me they can escape? Zizhong! Su Ming shouted. Marquis Zizhong, who had retreated far off in the distance, nodded and started to chase Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian. Marquis Xiefeng followed them. Damn it! Jian Wushuang turned pale. The 2 marquises were weaker than him. Though they were unable to catch up with their targets, Marquis Zizhong was smart as he did not plan to fight with them, only to keep following his targets. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian could not shake them off. We're in trouble. Jian Nantian, who had been indifferent to everything, wore a solemn look. Now they were at an extreme disadvantage. The experts who received the messages responded one by one. In an ancient forest, there were numerous palaces and pavilions. On top of a mountain, a beautiful pavilion with 9 floors stood. A white-robed elder sat on a chair on the top floor, flicking through a book. He looked mild, yet he also looked as if he had experienced many of the vicissitudes of life. After receiving Su Ming's message, The white-robed elder stood up with a grim expression. Sword Ancestor Cave Mansion has finally been found? The white-robed elder suppressed his excitement as he tore a space travel spell and stepped into the wormhole. On a small island, which was situated in the center of lake, there was a simple thatched cottage. A graceful purple-clothed woman sat by a stone table while playing Go by herself in the delicate thatched cottage. Suddenly, Su Ming's message arrived. Spirit Ancestor, I have some information about the Sword Ancestor Cave Mansion. Whether you come or not is up to you. The purple-clothed woman stopped her hand. The next moment, she stood up and looked up towards the sky. Sword Ancestor Cave Mansion, that old guy's cave mansion. The purple-clothed woman wore a complicated look. In an ordinary city, an old beggar lay in the corner of the street, as if he would die of starvation and coldness at any moment. He looked inconspicuous. Suddenly, Su Ming's message arrived. Blood Bladesman, I know the whereabouts of that thing you want. The old beggar suddenly woke up. His eyes looked as sharp as a blade, radiating a sliver of light. Sword Ancestor's Cave Mansion. For that thing I, Blood Bladesman, have lived here for thousands of years. Finally, I'll learn of its whereabouts. The vast divine land was not as quiet as it looked. The messages Su Ming sent attracted the attention of all the old monsters in the divine land. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian stopped on a mountain outside Sword Suppression Valley. Since they knew they could not shake off Marquis Zizhong and Marquis Xiefeng, the father and son gave up running. After a while, a towering figure arrived. He was a benevolent-looking white-robed elder, who looked as if he had bathed in sunshine and was covered by a saintly halo. A stream of affable aura radiated from him. It gave the surrounding experts a feeling as if their faces were being caressed by their mothers. The aura was so overwhelming that all the sword principal experts lost the courage to resist. This man, though Blind Emperor was blind, he still recognized the elder using his mind. Holy Ancestor! Blind Emperor ground out. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian were shocked. Holy Ancestor, you're quite fast. A cold voice rang out. A purple-clothed woman appeared in the nearby area. Buzz! The surrounding void suddenly shivered, causing bizarre waves to spread out. It let out a faint hum, which sounded like an ethereal tune, and reverberated through the whole area. Then, more experts began to show up, one by one, all with auras powerful enough to terrify a marquis. In the blink of an eye, a dozen people had gathered in the area. Some looked cold, some were excited, and some looked evil. Each of them was far superior to any marquis and even some sovereigns. Looking at those powerful experts, all the other sword principal experts were petrified. This is Holy Ancestor, Spirit Ancestor, and Stone Ancestor. The three ancestors of our divine land have gathered. Gosh! The entire crowd was shocked. The three ancestors had been a legend in the divine land. Normally, it was rare to meet a marquis. But now, the three ancestors gathered? What did this mean? Those people? Who are they? They dare to stand beside the three ancestors. The three ancestors were the strongest in our divine land, right? But those other people, where are they from? I feel that they are not weaker than the three ancestors. What happened? All the spectators were confused. The three ancestors were known as the supreme experts of the divine land. Each of them had reached the cloud realm. Every ancestor possessed extremely mighty strength. The 9 sovereigns were second to them. The 9 sovereigns had only reached the Tao. Although they were also at the cloud realm, they could not hold a candle to the 3 ancestors. However, now 8 experts stood alongside the 3 ancestors. There were 8 experts as strong as the 3 ancestors in the divine land. We haven't seen you for many years. How are you? Blood Bladesman, you still like being a beggar. Are you addicted to it? What's wrong with a beggar? I can take the earth as my bed and the sky as my quilt. I can drink whenever I want. I am very carefree. Dong Ming King, you're still in this land? The dozen supreme experts began exchanging greetings while standing in the air. After a while, Su Ming came over. Su Ming pay his respects to the masters. Su Ming, who always held a condescending attitude, behaved modestly because these experts were stronger than him. Su Ming, you said you have news on the whereabouts of the Sword Ancestor Cave Mansion. I hope for your sake that you weren't joking or... Holy Ancestor said slowly. Every word contained a mighty deterrence. Su Ming was a bit nervous but immediately smiled. Masters, don't worry. Since I sent the messages, I do have something to tell you. Su Ming began explaining. Jian Wushuang, Jian Nantian, and Blind Emperor gathered on the back of the mountain. They all had terrible expressions. They are super experts in the cloud realm. Jian Wushuang stared at those experts. Each of them had an overwhelming aura which could terrify him. Though Su Ming was good at illusory sword principle, his aura was not powerful. However, now the aura of these experts had made the young boy lose the courage to fight. I can't figure out why our master died and who was able to kill him, Blind Emperor murmured. After all, our master was the supreme expert in the whole divine land. Even if the three ancestors allied, they could not fight against him or kill him. But now I understand. The ones who fought our master were not the three ancestors, but a group of super cloud realm experts. Maybe more than that. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian wore a serious look. Now they were being targeted by the whole world. They could not help but think of that. Su Ming said he would let them experience the desperation Sword Ancestor felt. Now they understood what he meant. If I guess right, those experts should have come from the outside world, Blind Emperor said seriously. On hearing this, Jian Wushuang's face fell. There was always someone stronger than you. Jian Wushuang knew there were bigger worlds outside of the divine land. After all, he had met Leng Rushuang several times. Though she rarely showed her power, Jian Wushuang could guess some things from what Di Jing had said. Di Jing said that he was the seventh war god under the command of Emperor Shao from Tang of the East. It had proven that Leng Rushuang and Di Jing came from the outside world. Floating above the area stood a dozen towering figures with vigorous auras. Your honors, the heart-killing sword technique can't be learned from others, so I'm sure Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian know the location of Sword Ancestor's mansion and gained the technique inside, Su Ming explained. The dozen figures immediately looked toward Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian. Boom! Terrifying power came rushing towards the father and the son. Jian Wushuang, Jian Nantian, and Blind Emperor were struck with horror under the power. Jian Wushuang, Jian Nantian, I've heard of you from one of my disciples. A bald elder spoke slowly. His body seemed as cold as a stone. He was none other than Stone Ancestor, one of the three ancestors. You may still remember that disciple Zhou Xiu, Stone Ancestor continued. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian looked grave when they heard the name. They did remember Zhou Xiu. After all, he was a person they would never forget. Zhou Xiu thought highly of you too, especially you, Jian Wushuang. He said that you were barely 30. At such a young age, you must have gained some great opportunities to raise your power to such a high level in such a short time. Stone Ancestor said with a smile. As for the opportunities, I'm sure you must have gained them in Sword Ancestor's cave mansion. Stone Ancestor's words made sense. No matter how talented Jian Wushuang was, he could not have become as powerful as he was now without proper opportunities. What Stone Ancestor did not know was that the greatest opportunity Jian Wushuang acquired was the heavenly creation skill. Sword Ancestor's cave mansion was second. So, tell me, where is Sword Ancestor's mansion? Holy Ancestor, a white-robed elder, asked gently. However, his eyes were chilling. Tell me or go to hell. The other elders gazed at Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian with eager eyes. They were desperate to get Sword Ancestor's treasure, regardless of the cost. Experts like Blood Bladesman, Bagu Cave Master, and Dongming King were all from other places, but they had stayed in the Divine Land for 1,000 years just for the treasure, and the treasure now lay in Sword Ancestor's cave mansion. Jian Wushuang, Jian Nantian, and Blind Emperor could feel the elders' eagerness. Jian Nantian. Blind Emperor turned his unfocused eyes to Jian Nantian and said, We can't tell them the location of Master's mansion, even if we have to die here. I understand. Jian Nantian nodded seriously. Father, Emperor, I have one trump card, which may help us survive this time. Jian Wushuang chimed in. Oh! Jian Nantian turned to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked grave. His trump card was the jade slip Lung Rushuang had given him. Lung Rushuang had told him that she would come to help him once he crumbled the jade slip. At this moment, Jian Wushuang was in a situation where he could not get out of trouble on his own, and Lung Rushuang was his only hope. Without hesitating, Jian Wushuang took out the slip and held it tightly. Lung Rushuang, if you can save us this time, I'll repay you even if the price is 10 times greater. Jian Wushuang shouted in a low voice and crumbled the slip. Immediately, the surrounding space rippled. Jian Wushuang stared at it with expectation. The elders saw Jian Wushuang's action, but they did not take it seriously. They were super experts in this world and had managed to kill Sword Ancestor 1,000 years ago, so they did not care about a little boy's trump card. What? Jian Wushuang's expression suddenly darkened. How can it be like this? Jian Wushuang was surprised that nothing happened. He had crushed the slip and there had been a ripple, but after that, nothing happened. Lung Rushuang did not come. What's going on? Jian Nantian looked toward Jian Wushuang. I don't know. Jian Wushuang frowned as worry burned inside him. After he crushed the jade slip, there was only a small response and no one appeared. At this moment, his actions looked like a joke. Ha ha! What an idiot! Su Ming laughed. The experts all sneered at Jian Wushuang. What is he doing? Was he asking someone for help when he crushed that slip? But nobody came. Is he trying to deceive himself? Maybe it's true that he was seeking help, but the owner of the slip didn't reply. The owner must be afraid to face the 3 ancestors and the elders. It's not his fault. He is only a young boy. Who could he ask to help him? Moreover, who could even help him? Many eyes of pity were fixed on Jian Wushuang. Humph! Suddenly, a snorting sound echoed and caused everyone to quiet down. The sound was from a barefoot middle-aged man, one of the super experts. The man's aura was overbearing, which implied that he was a bad-tempered man. The man was called Bagu Cave Master. Boy, it seems that the person you are asking for help from is a coward. Stop struggling, boy. Tell me where the Sword Ancestors' cave mansion is and I'll ensure your safety. But if you dare to tell it to the others, I'll kill you, your family, and everyone who is related to you. Bagu Cave Master's chilling and threatening voice resounded through the area. His words obviously annoyed the other experts on the scene, who all frowned. Bagu Cave Master, you're in the divine land. As a stranger here, you are being too arrogant. Holy Ancestors said in a deep voice. Arrogant? Yes, I am. So what? Bagu Cave Master sneered. Bagu Cave Master, don't be so. Holy Ancestor shouted coldly and looked toward him, but he stopped speaking halfway, staring in a dumbfounded manner. Not only him, but also Spirit Ancestor, Stone Ancestor, Blood Bladesman, and all the others who looked at Bagu Cave Master were dumbfounded. What? What are you trying to say? Bagu Cave Master was still displaying his domineering manner. Bagu Cave Master, look behind you. Bagu Cave Master, behind you. Holy Ancestor's voice betrayed his horror. Behind me? Bagu Cave Master was confused. Yet, at the same time, he sensed someone breathing lightly behind him. The person was directly behind him, and he could tell they were within a half-meter from him. When did this person arrive? Bagu Cave Master's heart began to beat erratically. He was a supreme expert above the Cloud Realm. In terms of battle strength, he was confident that he could rank in the top 2 among the experts currently here and was just a little weaker than Sword Ancestor. Therefore, he could not believe that someone had approached him from behind and come so close without being noticed. How is this possible? Bagu Cave Master was terrified, as were the 3 ancestors, Blood Bladesman and Dong Ming King. They all watched the person standing behind Bagu Cave Master intensely. The newcomer was a skinny elder, who had chilling and weird eyes. The elder wore a meaningful smile and a ghostly light flashed in his eyes. Senior Di Jing. Jian Wushuang was surprised to see the elder. He had met the elder in the Puppet Master's cave mansion earlier. Di Jing, the seventh war god under the command of Emperor Shao from Tang of the East. He had been recognized as a great demon in the divine land 1,000 years ago. Old guy, you are so weak yet so arrogant. Di Jing spoke slowly and his voice was frigid. The next moment, his hand moved towards Bagoo Cave Master's shoulder. The hand moved slowly, but there was a strange power behind it. Bagoo Cave Master's face turned red as cold sweat began rolling down his face. He tried hard to dodge Di Jing's hand, but quickly discovered that he was frozen in place by an unknown force. Finally, the hand landed on Bagoo Cave Master's shoulder. It seemed like a casual pat, but Bagoo Cave Master felt as if his soul had been shaken out of his body. He was in a daze and unable to struggle. It took him a while to regain his consciousness, but he was immediately scared, to the point of feeling a chill and could not help gasping. It was so terrifying. The pat did not actually hurt him, but it showed him Di Jing's formidable power. He instantly understood that Di Jing could kill him as easily as crushing an ant. "Say, Senior." Bagoo Cave Master finally spoke, and the way he addressed the elder amazed all the surrounding experts. "Senior." Di Jing smiled ironically. "Just now, you were so arrogant and said that the boy asked a coward for help, didn't you?" Sorry. Bagoo Cave Master shook his head. "Don't be scared. After all, it was not me who he asked for help." Di Jing put on a smile. Bagoo Cave Master was relieved, but quickly, he heard Di Jing add, "In fact, he asked my young master for help." Bagoo Cave Master's eyes were wide with shock. He reckoned that Di Jing's young master had to be more powerful and terrifying than Di Jing. But he just called such a person a coward. "Old guy, you also said that if the boy would not tell only you the location of Sword Ancestor's cave mansion, you would kill him and anyone related to him, so you're going to kill me and my young master? I'm his acquaintance and my young master is his friend." Di Jing's voice became cold. Bagoo Cave Master swallowed hard and his heart was trembling in fear. He regretted saying those words so much that he wanted to beat himself. "Hump, I used to be so bad-tempered in the past that I would not have hesitated to kill you," Di Jing continued. "But you're in luck because my master told me not to kill anyone for 1,000 years. So, I will spare your life this time, but there will be a punishment." Having said that, Di Jing struck Bagoo Cave Master with a palm before the master could react. Bagoo Cave Master was unable to struggle and could only watch as the hand landed on his head, at which point he felt a strange power enter his body. To the horror of everyone, the master's body started to shrink visibly. In an instant, his body had become as small as a baby, but the change did not stop there. Finally, under everyone's eyes, Bagoo Cave Master transformed from a human being into a bell. Yes, a bell. Di Jing held the bell in his hand while he waved it in a direction that seemed to be empty. Suddenly, a greenish-black figure came rushing to him. The figure was a huge spirit beast, more than 3 meters tall, with greenish-black scales all over its body. The beast had a dragon's head, but its body was shaped like a lion, except that it had 6 feet. "What kind of spirit beast is that?" Seeing the beast, even those knowledgeable super experts could not help being confused. They had never seen such a beast before, and they could tell it was extremely powerful. "I feel pressured by this beast. What a terrifying beast. I've been to Ancient World and a dozen Plane Worlds, but I have never seen such a strange one. The important point is that its master is more powerful." The 3 ancestors, Blood Bladesman, Dong Ming King, and the others all looked at Di Jing in horror. In their eyes, Di Jing was the real monster because he turned a human being into a bell. There's no way Di Jing is from the Ancient World. Maybe he came from that place. Yes, he must have. Those experts had made guesses about Di Jing's background, which only increased their fear. Di Jing shook the bell with a smile on his face. "This transforming skill, invented by Witch Chiyun, is really useless in fighting, but there's no better method for punishing some juniors." After saying this, Di Jing tied the bell to the beast's neck. "Take this bell and play with it a little. When you get bored, you can throw it away," Di Jing said to the beast. "Moo!" The spirit beast made a slight sound as if it was responding to his master. Ignoring the eyes of horror on everyone's faces, Di Jing moved to Jian Wushuang. Senior Di Jing. Jian Wushuang bowed to him. I pay my respect to you, Senior. Jian Nantian and Blind Emperor bowed as well. They were impressed by Di Jing's power, just as the other experts were. Boy, you're quite capable to have drawn almost all the elders in the divine land here. Di Jing looked at Jian Wushuang with interest. Jian Wushuang forced a bitter smile and replied, Senior, please don't tease me. If it were not for you, we would have been torn into pieces. Hump, don't thank me. I didn't come here of my own will. I'm just obeying my young master's order, Di Jing explained. Lang Rushuang's order? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Young master left home not long ago. Before leaving, she told me to take care of you and help you when you're in danger. Di Jing shot Jian Wushuang a glance with a strange expression on his face. Young master is aloof and doesn't have friends. I don't know how you were lucky enough to draw her attention. Jian Wushuang was wordless upon hearing those words, but he finally understood why he did not receive a response from Lung Rushuang when he crushed the jade slip. She had gone to another world. By the way, young master told me to only save you once, which means next time you run into danger you won't get any help from me. Di Jing stared at Jian Wushuang while smiling and continued. What's more, I can only save you and take you to a safe place. As for your enemies, you have to deal with them yourself someday. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded. Di Jing could kill all the experts on the spot, but obviously he would not do so, and Jian Wushuang never expected him to do so. He was very grateful to Di Jing for saving his life. It doesn't matter. I still owe my life to Lang Rushuang, and someday I must pay her back. Jian Wushuang thought. Well, boy, you can't stay in the divine land anymore, so I'll take you out of here, said Di Jing. Jian Wushuang's expression changed. He knew very well that with so many super experts wanting to know the location of Sword Ancestor's cave mansion from him, he would be seeking death to stay in the divine land, but he was concerned about his father's safety. Senior Di Jing, what about my father and Senior Blind Emperor? Jian Wushuang finally asked. Your father? Di Jing looked toward Jian Nantian and lowered his voice. Jian Nantian, in order to improve your power, you have walked on a path of no return. It's very bold of you. A path of no return? Jian Wushuang looked confused. Jian Nantian stood in silence, and a moment later he said to Jian Wushuang, Shuanger, go with Senior Di Jing. I have my own path. Father, Jian Wushuang frowned. Boy, your father is right. He has his own path. Since he is already on that path, no one can stop him, not even me or my master. He is on his own. Di Jing persuaded Jian Wushuang. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang frowned harder. From what was said, he knew there was something wrong with his father, but he was not clear on what it was. Father has stepped on a path of no return to improve his power. No one can change his mind or stop him. I had planned to stay in the divine land longer, but it seems that I have to go for now. Jian Nantian murmured and took out a red token. The token looked unusual. However, using his sheer strength, Jian Nantian broke it. Voila! An overwhelming energy surged out from the token and cut the void open, revealing a red door. The inside of the door was completely red, as if it led to hell. Interesting. Even I dared not enter that door in the past. Seeing the door, Di Jing gasped. Father, what's going on here? Jian Wushuang asked anxiously. I have no choice, son. Jian Nantian looked grave as his eyes fixed on Jian Wushuang. It's true that there is no turning back on this path, but I have to do so to get a chance to see Wuming again. Mother! Jian Wushuang felt rather surprised to hear his mother's name, and merely said, Hasn't mother been taken away by Zhou? Zhou? Hell no. Zhou couldn't control her. She is not a common woman. She has left this world, and this is the only path that can lead me to her. I have to take this path no matter how dangerous it will be, even if there is no turning back. As long as I can see her again, I don't care if I have to become a devil or a ghost. Jian Nanshan's voice was frosty but sonorous, and there was a firmness in his eyes. Jian Wushuang was moved by his words. There was a smile on the corner of Jian Nanshan's mouth as he cast Jian Wushuang a glancing look. Then he entered the door without looking back. As soon as Jian Nantian crossed the door slowly disappeared in the air. Another man who fell deep in love. Di Jing shook his head. Jian Wushuang felt lost. It was only after a long while that he took a deep breath to calm himself down. Everyone has their own path. Since father was so determined, he has to do this on his own. Maybe someday when I become much more powerful I can help him. For now I'm too weak. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists as the desire for power burned in his eyes. Jian Nantian has left, so now it's your turn. Di Jing looked toward Blind Emperor and said in an icy voice, Blind Emperor, you know very well that it won't change anything even if I save you, don't you? Jian Wushuang's expression changed when he heard this. What do Di Jing's words mean? Blind Emperor smiled bitterly. Senior, I know I'm at death's door, but before dying, I have to complete my mission, so I hope you can grant my wish. Speak, Di Jing replied. I want revenge for my master. Blind Emperor spoke with a cold and decisive tone. One word at a time.